So in the last few videos we completed the entire modeling of our diorama. So after completing the model, I actually added one more small plane to add our grass. So once I completed the texturing, I'll be making multiple duplicates of this particular model, and I'll be placing around the model, so it'll look like a real grass is growing out of the ground. So the next thing is we have to go and do the unwrapping as well as the texturing process. So unwrapping is the process of converting these 3D models into 2D flat planes. So we will be able to actually draw out these extra details like these dots, color dots and lines and all that things. So in reality we are actually not going to flatten out these 3D models. Instead we have a option called UV, and here we have something called a UV editor. UV actually represents the X and Y axis of 2D plane. So whatever we are actually seeing in the UV editor, we'll be seeing the 2D representation of a particular model. So for example, if I selected the top part of a mushroom, you will be seeing how the 2D representation is in the UV editor. So for example, if I actually in real life, if we actually take a cardboard box or something, and if we cut out all the sides and make it flatten, you will be getting a flat version of a package or a cardboard box. So the same thing we will be applying here also. We will be flatten out all these 3D models in the UV editor, and after once we completed that process, it will be much easier for us to assign designs and extra details on that particular 3D model, and it will be much easier for us to assign these details on our 3D model. So that is the process we are going to do next. Once we completed all that unwrapping process for the entire model, then we will be moving on to creating the texturing process. So we will start with the main model, and for now I am going to we'll start with the base first. So first what you can do is, in the workspace panel you have a workspace called UV editing. So first the thing is we have to change it to UV editing. Once you change the workspace, you can see on the left side you will be having the perspective view, and the right side you have the UV editor. And always you have to remember, in the center we have a here the X and Y axis is actually represented. So we will be seeing only the 2D version of that our model. So once that is done, you can actually start unwrapping the model. The first thing is, when we select each of our model, you are actually already seeing an unwrapped version of our model. So in Maya, when we actually create in any software, when we actually create a 3D model, it will automatically create a UV for that, and sometimes it will be proper, sometimes it will not be proper, and based on our requirement you can actually change how each UV is actually splitted or separated. So for now I'll just isolate this particular ground model by pressing the isolate button, and once that is done, in the UV editor we'll be right clicking and selecting the edge option, and we will just select the entire edge. So now you can see, before selecting, let me explain why I am doing that. You can see a few highlight areas in our 3D model, and this highlighted area is actually showing where that UV is actually being splitted. So you can see, if I select the UV option in the UV editor, and once you see that there you have 3 different models, 3 different separate shapes, 2 circular shape and 1 rectangular cylindrical shape. So if you double click one circular model, you can see only the top part of our model is 3D model is selected. So that means the entire top part is actually separated into one part, and the middle part is actually separated into one part, and the bottom part is actually separated into one part. So we are going to do the same thing, but the thing is we don't want that split to be happening in these particular edges. We want to that to happen in different places. So before we start doing that, we have to make sure all these edges are actually stitched back together, so it will be easy for us to cut it again and split it into separate. Otherwise, if you start splitting it again, you will end up with too many of different parts, and it will be much difficult for you to manage everything and arrange everything. So we are going to merge everything together by selecting the edge and dragging and selecting the entire model, and we will just select a shift right click. And once you select shift right click, you will be getting a lot of options in the UV editor. Here in the top you can see an option called move and show UVs. So what happens is, when we select that one, it will automatically move the entire shape into different places, into the respective places, and it will merge everything or sew everything back to its original place. So now we have an entire model with no cuts or not splits, anything like that. Okay, so once the entire model is actually sewed back together, now we will be able to select the particular edges we want to cut, and it will be much easier for us to do that. So the entire top part is actually our ground. After that we have our border, then we have our base. So base part and the border part we can actually move it into one part, and the entire top part will be separated into a second part. So what we will do is, we will select this corner edge loop. We will just double click the entire edge loop, so the entire corner will be selected. So from the center to till this corner, it's actually our top ground. After that our frame will be starting. So after selecting that, you have to come back to UV editor and press shift right click, and here now you can see an option called cut. So once we selected that selected edge loop will be cut. Now in UV map you have two different parts. So you can see the highlight around that particular edge, so letting us know that that particular edge is actually splitted. So now we can actually in the UV editor, you can right click and select UV. UV is actually like a vertex in 3D model. So in 3D model, if you want to edit a particular model, you will be moving around the vertex itself. But in UV editor, you will be moving around the UV. So even if you are moving the UV, nothing will be changing in the actual model. Only the 2D representation of that particular model will be changing. That means if you are changing a UV point from the center point, so if you are moving that UV to a different place, the texture will be appearing on a different place instead of the center part. So that is the difference between UV and vertex. So once you selected the UV, you can double click either one of the model and you can just move it back. So now you have a top area and then the entire bottom and the frame area. So now you can see, even after splitting that into two different parts, we are actually seeing much different version of that models. So the top part is actually almost similar like our 3D model. It's actually circular, but in the second part it's actually it's not looking right. So what we have to do is, now we actually splitted everything into two different parts. Now we have to unfold it. Unfolding is like after splitting something, you actually cut the parts into different you actually made the cuts, but you have to separate that cuts into different parts. Then only the entire model will be flattened out. So what we will do is, we'll just double click this the second model, and we'll just shift right click, and now you can see an option called unfold, and you can go to the unfold option while pressing shift itself, and you can press the unfold option. Once you select the unfold option, it will take a few seconds. Now you can see it's actually properly unfolded, and you are seeing an entire unfolded version of that particular selected model. So you can select the second model. Also we will do the same thing. So it will unfold anything. If there is any problem with the previous cut model, it will unfold everything again and you will end up with a proper model. So now we actually have two different versions. One is our ground, the second one is our rest of the side area and the bottom area. So now we have to arrange everything in this particular area itself. So in UV editing you have to make sure that everything is aligned in this center area. If you are actually placing it anywhere else, it will not be able to export that into an image, and it will be much difficult for us to texture everything. So you have to make sure everything is aligned within this area itself. So the next thing is we have to prioritize which one of this area is actually important for us. So the top area is much important for us since we will be adding a lot of extra details like grass and different color shades and all. So we will just scale that one more and we'll just align it within this X and Y area. And the second one, rest of our frame and the ground, we will just scale it down and we will place it in a different area without touching the previously scaled part. So one more thing we have to make sure is it shouldn't be touching each other. So if you are touching each other, whatever colors or textures we will be adding for the first model, it will be appearing on the second model also. So we have to avoid that. So make sure that you are giving enough space between two different parts. So once that is completed, our unwrapping for the base model is completed. Now you can just select right click and select object mode to go back to its original model. So now we actually completed that unwrapping for the ground model. So in the next video we will be going over and continuing the same process for our rest of the models. So I'll see you guys in the next video.